All right, welcome to this week's edition of the Unknown Files Show with Outdoors Dan, brought to you in part by good friends out of Revelton Spirits in Osceola. If you haven't been out to the distillery, go check them out. They're doing some awesome things every day down there. And we're going to have some fun tonight. We got Marc Dantonio on again. We haven't had him on for a while. And I was excited because we had a whole bunch of stuff going on with the UFO disclosures and hearings and stuff. And Marc was out in the desert doing seminars and a whole bunch of other stuff, and I was glad to get him on. Marc, good evening. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Dan? What's going on?
I'm doing well, doing well. So,
Great.
how was your summer? Yeah, I know we're still in it a little bit, but did you have a good one so far?
Yeah, a lot going on, right? As you know, I can't sit still for whatever reason. I wish I could, but I can't. I'm not a beach guy. You're not going to find me on the beach. What you're going to do is you're going to find me working on a new piece of technology that might be useful to, further my science of astronomy or something. So I guess that means I'm kind of like the ultimate nerd. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a second. Hold on. I got it. Here, look. There's my glasses. I'm an ultimate nerd.
Yeah, see, I need to do that. I had LASIK done like 20, 24, 25 years ago when it first came
Wow.
out. And the guy forgot to correct my astigmatism. So I went from being nearsighted to foresighted. But the good thing about that is I'm 60 and I can still read like right here. So
Yeah,
how about
see,
how about that?
I'm nearsighted. I'm
Yeah,
nearsighted, and so the glasses are for being to see far.
yeah,
So
yeah. That's so we got that going.
yeah,
So what's going on with MUFON? I bet it's been really busy with everything going on this summer coming out of Washington, huh?
yeah. MUFON's actually pretty heavily involved with the Congress and doing consultation and so forth. So that's a good thing. It keeps us, it kind of in the know, so to speak. Um, but it also is a double-edged sword because then people say, well, MUFON, they're just another government plant now. They're just another government mouthpiece, and that's never been true. Not for me. I mean, I had fairly high clearance for decades, and with what I do with my business, and um, I started that in '94, and it has remained for decades, right?
Yeah.
So I know that people accuse that of me, but I was the guy that was actually uh, causing problems because I would be the guy that says to the program offices down in Washington, "Hey, there was this sighting of your classified object flying through the sky, and people need to know what it is, and I need you to tell me something for them to know." And they were like, "Tell them nothing. Tell them it's a UFO." No, that's exactly not what we're going to do. So I always gave them trouble about that. So I was kind of on the side of the disclosure folks way back in the beginning, even. So right now, um, it's kind of interesting now that the Navy trains its personnel to deal with unknown craft in the sky.
Really?
And it's also very interesting. Yes, they do. And it's also interesting that Navy pilots can come forward now and say, yeah, we had a transient object that was in and out of our sensors, here and gone, and holy cow, we don't know what was going on. We don't know what it is. Uh, and, you know, uh, Now it's no longer considered a problem. Airline pilots, remember that? They
Yeah.
used to be
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, treated like they're going to be thrown out on a psychological evaluation basis if they reported a UFO. That's no longer the case. So what's happened is UFOs went from being taboo in certain industries to now being a subject that can be discussed and investigated. And that's the thing that's different from how it used to be. So, little victories. We went from not being able to talk about it in the science arenas because you'll be considered a flake and an outcast to now not only being able to talk about it, but actually being able to research it publicly and not have any stigma associated with it.
Hey, so let me ask you a question. Now, you've been, your other business. I mean, you do a lot of really cool things. We talked about this the last time we had you on. You're a model builder, and you have subs, and I mean, so you're into some really high tech stuff. But why do you think it all broke loose last year with all this stuff being disclosed in these hearings and stuff? What do you think? And I don't want to get into politics, but Why do you think it's now where they went from this stuff is not real, or people are misidentifying things, to now they're actually saying no, these are actually crafted or not of this. There's no explanation for what these things are doing, and this is real.
Could be a couple of reasons, Dan. One of the things it could be is that they're using it as cover for yet another black project. Okay, there's a
Okay, well,
possibility.
see, that's what I was kind of thinking. Are they doing that so we won't? You keep looking over here. Don't look over here.
Yeah, that in fact, when I was working on a particular project like that, and they were testing it in a lake out in Idaho,
Hmm.
okay, Lake Pend Oreille, matter of fact, and they were flying this thing we called a birdie, and I was doing engineering models of it. They're flying it around over the lake, and somebody at the other end of the lake. The lake is long, and it's a resort at the other end, but it was a Navy base at the opposite end, and they were flying it over the Navy base. But somebody at the resort saw it and started driving down the lake shore and started taking pictures of it, and those pictures made their way to me, and I was like, "Uh oh, that's the classified birdie that they're flying around." I called the program office and I said, "You guys got to do something about this, or else, they're going to think it's some kind of UFO when it's not." And their response was, let them think it's a UFO. Great idea. No, no, that's not a great idea. Because tomorrow, that guy's going to bring 5 of his friends. And those 6 people are now going to bring 10 of their friends each. And next thing you know, you're going to have a virtual paparazzi crowd at your end of the lake. And they're going to look at this object, and someone is going to take a picture of it doing something you don't want them to see.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
that's
that's when the program office guys said, "Okay, let us just send you a statement that you can distribute." Okay, so they sent me a statement saying it's one of ours. We're just testing an advanced vehicle, and all the photographers went home. Everybody was happy, and they never had to worry about getting it photographed again because it wasn't a UFO. They understood finally that it was the thing being a UFO that drove everybody there to see it in the first place.
yeah, that's crazy. Hi, Roger. Hey, Robert, David. Good to see you. Russell, thanks for watching tonight. Roger, thanks for watching up in New York. We appreciate you. I got to tell you, I watched a little bit of that hearing, Mark, and I didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to watch all of it. But I mean, they were talking about that one gentleman. There was 3 gentlemen, and I can't remember which ones were who. But the one guy was saying that not only was this stuff legitimate, but I mean, he actually said he saw crash evidence and biologic evidence, and that was blowing everybody away.
Yeah, that was David Grush, and because we had Ryan Graves on the left, we had David Grush in the middle, and we had Dave Fravor on the end. Okay, and Fravor and Graves were pilots. Graves started an organization to kind of look at those guys and keep them safe, and Fravor was a retired Navy pilot who actually saw the very first uh, UFOs, not the very first, but he saw them and reported them, and it's through him they went public. Uh, and then Grush was the guy who was in the CIA and had an advanced position.
Hmm.
And he reported seeing these objects, as you reported, and he reported seeing these biological entities. Now, when asked what they were in the public meeting, he said, I can't talk about that now, but I could talk about it in a closed session. And everybody thought, well, why a closed session? I know exactly why, because I've been involved in programs of that nature, and I know what it means when they say that. What they're saying is the information about where it comes from, what it looks like, that's not the classified part. The classified part is how they got that information, the technology used to see the objects in the sky, or to shoot it down, or to capture an extraterrestrial biological entity. Okay, so it's the technology used to gain all this information that he would have had to have exposed, and that's something that they had to remain in a classified briefing. So,
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you.
no, he didn't.
These things are pulling so many different. I mean, I can't remember how many G's. He said it was no human could pilot these things, pulling the amount of G force that these things are pulling. No human could sustain it. How are we shooting that stuff down if we can't even catch up to them?
Well, first of all, that's actually, I don't believe that's a true statement. Yes, it was said, and yes, you're repeating what was said, but
Yeah.
it's not true in my view, because I don't believe the craft even have propulsion. So you're going to say, well, wait a minute, how the heck can they even work? They actually do something different. And I've been actually lecturing around the country on this other technology that my friend Bob Schroeder first started to get into, and he unveiled it, and I bought it, and I still buy it. It's the only possible way they can be here, and that is to do a dimensional shifting between our four dimensions X, Y, and Z moving through time, and a fifth dimension where the universe is compressed and contracted. So the farther in you go, the shorter distances become. Now, how do you get in? How do you actually come out? That's all part of the process about how they work. And it depends on certain particles called Kaluza-Klein particles. And it's kind of interesting that when you look at how these particles interact with a spacecraft of some kind, if you surround your ship with these particles come from this fifth dimension. So they'll actually pull you in. And the more you put around your ship, the farther in you go. And the farther, when you come back out, the farther you can move. So you basically have exit points and entry points. So you have an exit point from our four dimensions, you go up to this fifth dimension, and then you come back into our four dimensions at a different location. So you just have coordinates. You're not actually moving. And this is the hard part. You're actually just popping out and in rapidly over and over and over. So if you do that like this, bam, 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 now I got to make a zigzag where you're going up into this fifth dimension every single time. All you're doing is moving slightly further along. You go a little bit into this fifth dimension. The universe is not as compressed, but the slightest motion on your part, the slightest reinsertion into our four dimensions can take you a little bit ahead of where you just were. And you do it again and again and again. And so from our perspective, we see a ship screaming across the sky, what we would call Mach 10 or something.
Right.
But in fact, the creatures or the beings in this ship feel like you right now. They don't feel anything like that. They're just doing dimensional shifting, and they just see the world around them changing ever so slightly as they pop in at different locations.
So they're
Um,
not moving, but everything around them is moving.
well, they're shifting out of the dimension and then they're shifting back in at a slightly different location.
I got you.
They have an exit point and an entry point, and I think that this is probably the only way that is actually relatively feasible to travel the universe is through this mechanism. You can't do it any other way. The Alcubierre drive was one. Alcubierre, right? That was one where the warp drive, as they called it, where it folded space. You can get to Alpha Centauri in 5 days. Wow, that's so cool. That's a lot shorter than the 10,000 years it would take us right now at the fastest possible speed. However, with this method where you would pop out and pop in, you could do it in the equivalent of a 20-minute ride.
So, do you think we're reverse engineering that stuff?
I'd like to think we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting to note that CERN, CERN, overseas,
Yeah.
they're building an accelerator, and you can look this up online. You look up CERN and KK particles, and you'll see the white paper they've got up there right now. And they're actually building an accelerator to investigate in part these particles. Why? Because they're very interesting. Hmm. They're very interesting.
Is it
And
is
it's
that is that like a is that the telescope, Mark? The
no,
CERN?
CERN is the Large Hadron Collider
Okay.
and the other particle accelerators overseas. They're actually doing atomic studies, atomic nuclei, and so forth. Um, and the Kaluza-Klein particle, elusive as it is a very very different particle, and it's actually a graviton. Now, when you look at quantum mechanics, I'm not going to teach
Yeah. You
anyone.
know, you remember my third grade education here.
Yeah, right. Um, but there are four fundamental forces in the universe, right? We have
Yeah.
a strong force, we have a weak force, we have electromagnetic, and we have gravity. These three over here, the strong, weak, and electromagnetic is light, okay, and so forth. Um, those three we can describe as both particles and waves, okay? And gravity we can describe as a wave now. Before this, we couldn't. We couldn't describe it as a wave until we saw gravitational waves. Yay! That's in advance. So where's the gravitational particle? Right? We have gravitational waves. When black holes collide, we see the ripples through space and time, and they reach us, and we see them with our LIGO observatories that are around the world. We have one in Hanford, Washington, one in Louisiana, and then there's a detector over in Italy. And these detectors can detect these gravitational waves coming from colliding neutron stars and colliding black holes. And so we've seen gravitational waves, something Einstein never thought we'd see. Okay, so Einstein wasn't always right. But on the other hand, we've never seen a gravitational particle. But that's where these Kaluza-Klein particles come into play. Because if we can generate them, then those will be gravitons that are 10 to the 17th times more powerful than the gravitons holding you down to your chair right now. And that means that they're going to create micro black holes. And micro black holes would be emanating from your spacecraft and surrounding your craft in a sheath, basically, like a sleeve.
Yeah.
And those micro, I know this is all crazy, but you got to hear it out
No,
because,
no, you're good. Go ahead. Tony says this is really interesting. Thank you, Tony.
oh, okay. Yeah, thanks. The micro black holes, they only live like nanoseconds, all right? They come and they go. Black holes evaporate. When they're really tiny, they evaporate very quickly. But if you keep a net amount that are flooding around the outside of your ship, what happens is those black holes pull your ship because they're Kaluza-Klein gravitons. They pull your ship into this fifth dimension. And the fifth dimension is highly warped, like I said. So the farther in you go, the more close distant objects in the universe become.
So
Okay.
it funnels everything down.
Yeah. So if you only go in a little bit, then you could travel, say, through our atmosphere just by going in a little bit and then punching in a slightly different location. So you do that over and over and over and over and over. And we'll get to how you can do that. Now, if you go in a lot, well, then you can travel larger distances. And the benefit is your ship doesn't have anything in it other than a reactor that generates these particles. All right. Now, how do you generate these particles? Well, it looks like the only thing you would need to generate them is a fusion reactor. Wait a minute. Didn't I hear that Lawrence Livermore made great strides with fusion in this past year? They managed to get a relatively sustained reaction. They didn't get more energy out than they put in, but they did manage to sustain a reaction for a little bit of time until they shut it off. It's a major milestone. So it's quite a notch toward having a real fusion reactor. And on the other side of the ocean, CERN, with its Large Hadron Collider and new accelerators they're building, are studying these Kaluza-Klein particles because, as I said, they're very interesting. So marry what CERN is doing with what Lawrence Livermore has discovered, and someday you can see we'll have a Kaluza-Klein particle understanding and we'll have a fusion reactor understanding. Marry the two together, and now we'll have a technology to travel between the stars potentially. So we're probably 100 years from this. Maybe that's optimistic. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, it means that because we can see this sort of now, it means that there's probably a civilization out there that's already done this. You know, we had some setbacks here. Let's be honest. We've had 5 major extinction events on our planet. In fact, 250 million years ago, 96% of all life on this planet was wiped out by a volcanic eruption that released lots of CO2 into the atmosphere, destroying the oxygen carrying capacity of the oceans, killing plankton and animals that had existed at that time. And it took a long time for that to recover, but it did. And then we had the Chicxulub impact where the dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. And that was a major impact that sent a lot of dust into the air. Dinosaurs on the other side of the globe didn't even know what happened. They just saw that the sun was getting more and more and more dim. And so the plants died. The plant eaters died that ate the plants. And then the meat eaters that ate the plant eaters died. And so it was a cascading effect. And it didn't happen like overnight. It's not like the whole earth was like boom and they're all dead. It took a number of months to years for this to be in full effect. But then again, it worked out. Now, back in the Permian, 250 million years ago, the dominant life form were those creatures that were going to become mammals. We're mammals,
Yeah.
okay? But they were most sensitive to this volcanic eruption and they died. And that led the way to the next major life forms to dominate the planet. And when that happened, that was when the age of the dinosaurs began. And dinosaurs ruled all the way until 65 million years ago when they were wiped out in the cascading failures after that impact. And guess who was waiting in the wings? We were. The things that would become mammals were waiting in the wings, and we filled the niches again that became emptied by the dinosaurs dying. And this led to the evolutionary tree we see now. So if you think about it, we started our evolutionary tree over again. Let's say 65 million years ago. Okay.
Right.
And then we had the hominins, okay, the ape creatures and the Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis in Africa. Okay, little 4-foot diminutive little girl that became the epitome of the human ancestor. And then now that was 4 million years ago when Lucy existed. So over 4 million years, we progressed to where we are now. Okay, now what's really cool about all this is what if, what if during the Permian period there was no major volcanic eruption? What if there was no extinction event 65 million years ago? What would life look like on this planet now? It makes a great alternative history science fiction novel.
Yeah.
We don't really know, but think about it. What if humans and hominins developed 20, 50 million years before Lucy? Where would we be now? Okay.
As
Now,
far
there's
as
planets as far as technology advancement and
yeah,
right. See what I mean?
yeah,
So, and as astronomers, we see that there are sliding windows of planetary formation out there. We see planets that are just forming now. We see planets that are at the end of their life cycles. We see planets that are 12 billion years old. The galaxy, or the universe rather, is only 13.8 billion years old. You know, and that may be changing too. That's a whole other topic. But if you think about it, it means that planets have existed from nearly the very beginning of time, essentially, and made in the early universe, in other words. And so it means that a civilization that was lucky enough to be in that position where they had a planet that was super habitable, not relatively habitable like Earth. Earth isn't the best planet to be on. I mean, we have UV radiation from the sun, we have earthquakes, we have tornadoes, we have plate tectonics, we have all these asteroids from space, meteor impacts. We have all kinds of collapsing problems that cause a collapse of ecosystems. Okay, yet we still survive in spite of that. There might be other planets out there that we call super habitable where we could survive gloriously. No plate tectonics, maybe, but maybe we have a relatively stable climate, same all year round. You know, so we don't have anything going on there. Maybe the sun is more stable, that star is more stable, and there's not a lot of ultraviolet radiation hitting the ground, which causes mutations in DNA, which is why there's so many species here, probably because the sun over the many years has mutated DNA and cells. Um, so it's possible that we might see uh, many very much older life forms out there that reach intelligence, possibly. It's not a foregone conclusion, but it is a potential destination. And
yeah.
with the
I've always been one to believe that it'd be kind of arrogant to think we were the only life out there. I've always thought that was more possible. But even if it was in a different planet on a different system, I mean, if there's an atmosphere, and I mean, energy's energy, they're still going to have weather patterns or weather effect, right?
sure, sure, but if you think about it, our energy. This is a really, really heavy duty topic.
Yeah,
What drives the Earth's weather systems and stuff, and that's a semester class in itself. Okay,
yeah.
but
It's beyond me, Mark.
it's that's we're not going to even go there. Okay,
Yeah,
because we
it's
don't
just
need to.
energy can never really go anywhere. I mean, energy's energy. I mean, it might transform into something else, but it doesn't. You can't.
That's
Energy's always going
precisely
to
correct.
be. Yeah, it's always going to be constant, right?
Precisely correct. You can't create it or destroy it. You just change it from one form to another.
Right.
Uh, but on a planet like ours, in spite of all the extinction events, and here there were 5 major ones. Okay, some from extraterrestrial asteroid impact, some from homegrown impact, some from just failures to thrive at certain points in time. Um, Even in spite of that, we have managed to climb the technological ladder, you know, and we've got to the point where we're now in a place where the next 100 years can mean the difference between whether we can go interstellar or be stuck here. And
Okay,
there's some
what?
real dangers, by the way, of not being able to leave our planet too.
No, no, I get it. I Let me ask you this: what about all the stuff they're finding on Mars, and as far as where they're finding? Uh, I don't know, Mark. I'm probably not saying this right, but they found cells, or they found some trace of life or past life on Mars. Is that right?
Well, they found actually here's what they find on Mars. Okay, um, there's very interesting formations that indicate that there was a large amount of water at one point
Right.
on Mars. Things there that can't form without the presence of water as we know it. So when we see that stuff, when we see that kind of thing, then we know that Mars was much, much wetter in the past. And by the past, we don't mean 50 years ago. We mean 3 billion years ago,
Yeah.
right? And that makes you feel like, well, that's so far away in the past. But if you look at how long it took Earth to have its first cells to come out here, we're talking potentially only after 1.5 billion years, maybe 2 billion years. And it was after just over 2 billion years ago when phytoplankton in our oceans began to spew oxygen into our atmosphere. Well, the same thing happened on Mars. Mars had a lot wetter past, had a lot more oxygen, and so could it have been life forms? Now, plankton don't leave any fossils behind. Okay, so if there are some that have, we can't find them at this point because we're there. You know, it's like going to Antarctica, probing one patch of snow 2 inches by 2 inches in size, and saying, "Yep, there's no life on this planet." you know, we don't
Well,
get everywhere. We need to go a lot of places on Mars to know for sure.
could some of that stuff be just from transitory from other systems or other planets, Mark?
That's panspermia that you're talking about, the possibility that life is transferred from one planet to another. And that's not off the table at all. We know that in Antarctica, there were Martian meteorites found. We also know that in one of those Martian meteorites were some very curious formations that look like they were possibly microbes of some kind or bacteria. Now, that particular meteorite, people are on the fence. Some say absolutely, some say nah, it's baloney. But then we know for a fact that some meteorites have also transported amino acids here. Amino acids are very important.
Oh, they're like
These
a
are
building block.
they very good, exactly right. Those are
Right.
building blocks of life as we know it.
Yeah.
And here on Earth, our DNA is built from a lot of carbon, a lot of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And there are amino acids that carry many of these elements, and they are important to the formation of and maintenance of life. This is something that I would expect to see because at one point when Mars was wetter, it was also warmer. Not because it was closer to the sun, but because the atmosphere could trap some of the infrared energy from the sun. It was never as warm as Earth, but it was a little warmer than it is now. It's minus 80 to 90 on Mars now. Okay, it used to be a lot warmer than that, so maybe it was only minus 10 or maybe zero, possibly even 32 degrees Fahrenheit at some point in its seasons where it's the high summer at the bottom of a canyon or something. And the pressure was high enough, so maybe at some point in the distant past, but not now, there could have been puddles of liquid water that would then evaporate as the seasons changed. And that's possible. But you have to keep in mind that water being liquid is a very important feature for life as well.
Yeah.
And on Mars, we know there's no liquid water at the surface. But we know that below Mars' south pole, about a mile or so down, there is a 12 or a 15-mile long reservoir of potentially liquid water below the surface. Now, why would it be liquid water? Because the weight of the sediments above it pressing down increase the pressure at that depth and allows liquid water to stay there. Now, if the liquid water burst out of the ground, it would just go psst and vanish. It would sublimate into the air as water vapor. And then the solar ultraviolet energy that enters the Martian atmosphere unimpeded will rip the hydrogen away from the oxygen and
You
rip it
just
apart.
dissipate.
Yeah, it's called photodisassociation.
Yeah.
Big word, but it means, yes, dissipate, get rid of it.
All
Yeah,
right, Scott's got a question for you. Saying
sure.
everything that you guys have just said, how how is this going to come back to what folks are reporting in the skies as far as cluster ships or cluster vehicles, or how would that work as a cluster? I guess he's talking about some of the sightings in Los Angeles, and what where there's like several craft at one time.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, our solar system is one place that we're looking for life, past or present, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't life elsewhere. It's come here. I'm going to tell you right now, and I've said this to many people. Okay, um, this planet is a bright, blazing beacon of blue. What do I mean by that? You can tell from thousands of light years away that there's some likely life here. Now, how in the world can you do that? Are we like because of our lighting? No. Because of our pollution? Maybe. But what's the real thing in our atmosphere that gives it away?
The
Gives it
water.
away, huh?
Water.
Well, water is very important. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so if you see water, that's important. Yes, it is. But it's actually the oxygen in our
Oxygen. Okay.
atmosphere. And the
Is,
reason is because life is replenishing that oxygen in our atmosphere. Right? Now
right.
there's geological reasons, Dan, that oxygen can be created. Okay, there are processes, like you said, water could be generated and then disassociated, and we'd have some free oxygen floating around, which may bond with another oxygen molecule, and you get O2. Okay, so there could be geological ways to generate oxygen, but the quantities that are in our atmosphere, the quantity of oxygen that you see on an ongoing basis means that it's actually being replenished. The reason is because oxygen doesn't just sit in an atmosphere.
Right.
It's a very, very dynamic atom. It will go and bond with anything it can find that it's compatible with. Many times that's an iron compound. And when it bonds with an iron atom, two iron atoms and three oxygen atoms form rust, Fe2O3. Fe is iron, O2 obviously is oxygen, but O is oxygen. So Fe2O3, the chemical formula, that's rust or hematite. And if you notice, we mentioned that Mars was a lot wetter in the past and had a much thicker atmosphere with more oxygen in it than it has now. All right. For whatever reason, as that atmosphere thinned and allowed the ultraviolet energy to penetrate, that water was, as we mentioned, as you said, dissipated. It was disassociated into hydrogen, which got lost to space, and oxygen, which dove down into the ground. That oxygen bonded with the majority of iron compounds in the Martian surface. So guess what? The orange color of Mars is because it rusted.
Right. That makes
See?
sense.
So,
Yeah. No,
so
I get
Mars
that.
rusted.
Where are we going to go in the next year or so? I mean, what's going to come out of all these hearings and committees that they're going into now? I mean, what are you seeing as a MUFON researcher? Are we going to get any? I mean, I know we just talked a lot of theory, right? And you're way above me on that stuff, Mark. What as far as something that an average person can relate or where are we going to go with all this information? Or is it going to become more clear? Or is it going to be declassified to keep us occupied, to not where we don't see something like you said before?
Hard to tell, Dan. And the reason it's hard to tell is because every nation on this planet wants alien technology
Yeah,
for power, right? If they have a way to power their ships that we don't know about, or a way to make a fusion reactor, we want that knowledge, right? So we want to reverse engineer, just like you had suggested earlier.
all right. Well, let me ask you this then: is this going to be where they don't? Is this something that you think they don't want us to see what's going on in AI? With everything going there, I mean, you can't. Everything's kind of shifted from the paradigm of UFOs and extraterrestrial. Now everything's kind of shifted to AI. You hear what I'm laying down there?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, is that going to be the next? Is that going to be the next thing that we start finding out that this AI has been around way longer than they think
Uh,
from another area?
it might not even be our AI.
Well, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. It's something
Yeah.
that
I
came
mean,
here from
well, think
another
about
planet.
it. Think about this. People report aliens, right? They report
Yeah,
these alien creatures, and they report sometimes that they're just seemingly indifferent. They don't have any concern whatsoever. It's like they have no feelings, whatever. No, that's fine. We shouldn't be projecting our morality on alien creatures that we know nothing about their origins or their development. However, if you think about it, what if they're not really sentient creatures? What if they're biological robots? That's something we're doing now. We make robots in our own likeness. Boston Dynamics does.
right.
They got Box Stacker. They got Atlas, which bounces around on all different surfaces. They got Big Dog. They've got the other little dog that you can actually buy. How cute. Okay. But if you think about it, those are the fundamental early AI machines. And Google's got their fingers in all that. So, we see the Terminator movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's like, I'm a Terminator, it's what I do. Okay, well, the thing is, okay, let's be fair. All right. Maybe Google's the next Skynet. Okay, I don't
Well,
know.
yeah, that's I see. That's what I was asking because my wife and I were talking about the other night. She goes, Dan, I was just talking about something and it's in my phone timeline I said, well, honey, that's because that's what they're doing now. You can't see if you got Alexa or whatever Siri,
Yeah.
and next thing you know, if you're talking about a subject, I see it all the time in my Facebook or my on my
Yeah.
Instagram. Whatever I talk about's in there within half a day.
Well, look, it's not paranoia to say always listening,
Yeah,
always watching.
yeah,
It's not paranoia. In fact, it's a marketing tool. They listen to what you're saying and say, "Ooh, let's push some ads for this new drone to this guy Dantonio because he was just talking about the new DJI Arvada drone." So if I say DJI Mavic Pro drone, my phone heard that.
yeah.
Now let's see if we have some ads before the end of the broadcast on the
Oh,
DJI
and that's a great
Mavic
drone, by the way.
drone.
I've got the Maverick too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
that.
have either of those two. I have an old Phantom 2 that I converted to have a FLIR on it that I put on.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine what you got.
I use that. Well, I
I,
got a big one too, a
I'm like
hexacopter carbon fiber.
I'm like Fred Flintstone trying to work in the Jetsons time, man. It's just
Nah,
yeah,
nonsense. No,
it's
this.
crazy. Aaron says aliens do exist. How do you think we got half of what we have now, technology wise? That's a great
I'd
comment.
love to. I'd love to think that that's possible that we reverse engineered. There's a book, The Day After Roswell, by Frank Corso, and he talks about how he seeded companies around the country with technology gleaned from crashed UFOs, and that might be real. That might be true. I really like the book. A lot of people say that he was full of it, but you know what? It's a great read anyway. So it's possible, and as a science guy, I'd be arrogant to say that's not possible, right? And I've been fighting the arrogance in science for decades, and that's the thing that really, really irritates me is that science is supposed to be more open-minded than it turns out to be. A lot of them are very open-minded, to their credit, but there's still holdouts that they just don't buy it, and
Yep.
it's like you got to be open to it.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, since I started doing the show, Mark, I'm way more open-minded about stuff than I've ever been in my life. I mean,
Right? Yeah.
it's I mean, just from Bigfoot to everything else, it's crazy what I've learned.
Oh,
Hey,
Bigfoot doesn't exist. I'm just kidding.
yeah, there you go. I did. That was Mark, not me. No,
Yeah,
I don't. I mean, I don't
that's
know if he's
proven.
real or
That's
not. I think it'd be cool if he is real. But man,
that
I've been talking to some of these biologists and stuff and
yeah.
anthropological professors, and and I'm not going to turn this into a Bigfoot thing, but just the track anatomy and stuff that they got back from the 50s,
Yeah.
with the dermal ridges and stuff that they found on these tracks. There's no
Yeah, it
there's
was
no
a
way.
different taxonomic creature. And you see, that's part of the reason I actually developed my FLIR drone,
Yeah.
was to be able to go hunting for potential creatures that no one's yet seen. Um, I would love to take it into the state of Washington, to the woods up there, and have a Bigfoot expedition take me on to run this infrared system. I almost did it here in Connecticut, but uh, the guy that I wanted to do it with, I was with a bunch of people. He objected vehemently to disturbing the Bigfoots up there, and he said that they would know that it was an infrared drone. And I'm like, well, you're giving them quite a lot of credit.
Yeah. Well, I don't
I think
think I don't think they're apes if they're real. But anyway, let's. I don't want to get it. I want to ask you, with all the naval stuff that you've done and how you are educated with underwater vehicles and stuff. What do you think's been going on with all the whales? That we've been getting so many whales that have washed up and beaching themselves. What's going on the coast and stuff? It, what do you think's happening there? Is
well,
it an
part of the problem.
echolocation disturbance? Is it sonar? What do you think's doing it?
There's a lot of things happening. Okay, part of the problem is that we're using technologies that could disturb whales and cause them to uh, lose their ability to navigate properly. Um, if you look at what's it called? There's like shipspotter.com or something like that. And you look at all the ships in the sea and recognize that you can hear a whale song for 3,000 miles if you're another whale.
Right.
Okay. Well, in that 3,000 miles, there may be 500 to 1,000 ships
Pinging.
churning through the water.
Yeah.
Okay. No, just surface ships
Okay.
churning through the water. And so your navigation is going to be compromised. So I think that whales and dolphins alike have problems
Yeah.
with that.
Well,
I just I looked up there because I actually have a dolphin skull and spinal cord from the Cape Verde Islands in a area where the dolphins all go to die. Not all, but it's a location where dolphins tend to go to die. And this little bay is littered with hundreds of thousands of dead dolphins. And why there? No one knows. So the animals have these certain things, just like there's an elephant graveyard.
right.
Okay.
Right.
And we're not giving them the benefit of the intelligence they have.
Oh no!
You know,
Listen, I used to. I was that close to being an ichthyologist, Mark. When I was
really.
younger, yeah. One of my first summer jobs. I trained dolphins,
No.
Atlantic bottlenose dolphins, and I mean, from somebody in Missouri, I could sit there and say, they're part of the Cetacea family. There's subphylum Tursiops truncatus, and I mean, I could tell you anything you want to know about their echolocation capabilities, and I mean,
Yep.
I swam with them. It was awesome. But
Yeah.
I would really, I don't know. I wanted to ask you because with you being with the subs and stuff, I mean, the subs have been around for since the 40s. I mean, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but I
Yeah.
mean, do you think it's stuff that's on the surface as far? I mean, do the wind turbines is that something that's messing them up?
I think that it's the see. First of
Surf?
all, when you think about submarines, most of the subs in the ocean are using passive sonar. They're just listening.
Yeah,
They're not pinging. When they ping, that is a huge disturbance in the ocean, and pinging does cause whales great difficulties. And so there are rules about submarines pinging in certain locations in the ocean where there are whales, and they're not allowed to do it. Okay, it was something to ease the problem with migrations for whales. Um, so um, I know that stuff that's underwater can cause problems. I know that stuff on the surface can cause problems. The thing is, sound travels so much more clearly underwater than through the air. Okay, that's the thing that's interesting. You could hear sound for thousands of miles underwater that you can only hear for hundreds of feet on the surface, depending on which way the wind's blowing. You know, so we know that sound and creatures that evolved in the ocean have a heightened sense of awareness about where they are, what they're
right,
hearing. You know, so they have evolved slowly to try and deal with us. Right now, we have to do ocean commerce. We have to do um, you know submarine work. We
Well,
have to
but
do
that's what I'm saying. That stuff's been going on for 50, 60, 70 years. I mean,
yeah.
it just seems like the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's becoming more frequent on the East Coast and stuff. From what I'm seeing, and after what
Yeah.
you told me you saw underwater, and I don't want to, we talked about you know what I'm talking about, right? That
Yeah, fast mover.
yeah, that fast mover. I didn't know if that had something to do with it or if it was something else in your opinion.
See the okay. Let's talk about that briefly. If you think about for those that don't know, I was on a boat briefly as a guest, and people say, "Well, they don't have guests on submarines." Well, I beg to differ. Okay, and I have the proof.
Yeah,
But the bottom line is, on this boat, on the sonar station, something came through the sonar, and I was sitting right next to the kid on the sonar because I was seasick, trying to get my stomach back. Let's be
yeah,
honest, no pride here. And uh, underwater, it feels like you feel right now in all of your rooms and where you're listening to from. There's no movement detectable, really. But on the surface, you rock and roll until you dive. So I got really sick and nauseous. So I was sitting next to the kid running the sonar, and he announced that there was something on the sonar, and the executive officer came to look and asked him how where the bearing and range was, and he gave it to him, and then he asked about the speed, and the kid was incredulous when he turned to the executive officer in his seat and said, "Several hundred knots, sir," and he didn't know what to do with it because a sonar guy is supposed to be able to classify every single thing they see, and he didn't know what to do with this. So the executive officer just looked at him and said, "Okay, log it and dog it." And the kid went, "Sir, yes, sir." I went right back to work. And I was like, "No, no, I'm an important guy. They invited me on this boat. I'm going to go talk to this XO and I'm going to get some answers."
yeah,
Big shot that I am. So I walked over to him. I strode over with a little arrogance. I don't mind telling you, because hey, I got invited to be on the boat. I'm important. You can see where this is going.
yeah.
And I said to the XO, I said, "Yeah, XO, I know about these things. I can help you. You need some help with this fast mover?" He looks at me and he says, "Dantonio, right?" I said, "Sir, yes, sir. You having a good trip so far?" "Sir, yes, sir." "Let's keep it that way." And he turned and walked away. Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter your clearance level. Doesn't matter unless you're in the program, unless you're part of it. It's none of your business. So get out of here. Forget about it,
Forget
right?
about it. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
then
we
they
don't
go,
we don't have anything that moves that fast.
no, we don't.
No, nothing.
Not at the near silent level this thing was.
Yeah,
And a few years later, I had to do a job for the Joint Chiefs. Now they're the big wigs. Okay, I drove a project down to the Joint Chiefs down in D.C. and I was with one of the chiefs, and I said to him, "Sir, what can you tell me about the Fast Mover program?" And he could have said, "I have no idea what that is. What are you talking about?" Instead, he looked me right in the eye and said, "I'm sorry, Mark, I can't talk about that." I was like, "Ha ha!" He just admitted it exists without telling me anything.
right.
So I drove the 6 hours back from Washington to Connecticut in a daze. I literally almost gotten multiple accidents because I wasn't paying attention to that truck because it was getting much closer to me because I was, you know, not paying attention to my speed. I don't know how I survived it, but man alive, this is real stuff. And by the way, that was decades ago. So now, that was back then. That was something you didn't talk about. That was something that was, not discussed. And the Navy still has the order to observe and report what these things do. They can't do anything about them, and they're ordered not to engage.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Do
there's
not
so
engage them
so much of
unless
the
they show an
ocean, Mark.
offensive move toward you.
I mean, you get down in some of those trenches, the Mariana Trench, and some of these other places. They're so deep. I mean, we have really no idea what's down there, do we?
And you know that technique I was telling you about, the punch out and punch in, where they
Right. Right.
use those particles to go into that fifth dimension.
Yep.
If you oscillate back and forth between that fifth dimension and your present dimension, you could go into the deep trench and be there and move around, punch in, punch out, move all over the place. You're not really there, and you're not really in the fifth dimension.
So you're not
You're
dealing
kind
with
of
the pressure.
always in motion, so you don't need to worry
Yeah.
about the high pressure down there.
Yeah.
And that's how these things operate.
Yeah.
Well,
That's awesome.
what that kid saw in the sonar was very likely an object that was punching out and punching in a few feet ahead of where it was, because that's all they can do. They don't have motors to push them along. So they punch out and punch in. They just do that over and over. It's a computerized thing.
Yeah.
The fusion reactor moderates it, and they just say, how far do you want to go? And they certainly have an algorithm to figure out if I just want to go, 10 feet ahead at a time, then we'll just go in a little bit into this fifth dimension and we'll be able to do it. And you just point the nose and there you go. Off
Hey,
you go.
we got about 7 minutes left, Mark. I want to talk about your observatory.
Oh, yeah.
Last time you were on, I actually went on there, and I can't remember the event you were hosting, but there was what was it? Was it a comet or what was
Oh,
that?
probably. We were looking at a comet, probably.
Yeah, that was
Or
pretty
a
cool.
supernova.
Tell everybody about your observatory.
Oh, yeah, yeah. If you go to skytourlive.org, skytourlive.org, um, we are a organization that actually has these remote telescopes that we've set up around the country. There's one here, actually, that one that you see right behind me there,
Yeah.
that guy right there, that is in my office only because COVID prevented me from rebuilding the building. I sold the previous actual dome it was in, and I moved it in here to rehab it, but it's going back in a building out here. We have one in Arizona, in the Arizona desert. We have a second one going in the Arizona desert in a couple months. And what they are these remote observatories that I run from Connecticut. And like last night, we went till 2 a.m. East Coast time, and we photographed the most incredible stuff. And the whole point is we are bringing you the universe live in real time. And as an astronomer, I show you these objects that you just don't see without a telescope. And then we talk about them. We talk about where they come from, how they occur, point out details. It's like an astronomy class, and you learn without even realizing you're learning. We have thousands of people around the world that have been tuning into us. And we actually also make milestone events occur. Like in 2019, there was a lunar eclipse, and of course, we were streaming it. And that one was streaming with that telescope right there. And while we were streaming it, the moon was blood red on the screen. And all of a sudden, you saw a white flash hit the moon. And we were one of 5 groups on the whole planet that literally caught a meteor striking the moon at the height of the lunar eclipse.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's so cool. So, in
Yeah.
other words, the universe is still very dynamic.
Yeah.
And we saw it happen live.
Yeah. That's
With the
great.
asteroid going through the sky, you can literally watch it moving through the field of view as you're talking. We see comets, these cosmic interlopers that come in, circle the sun, and leave. Um, we look at planets, we look at nebulae and galaxies. Last night, we actually looked at a supernova in a galaxy 22 million light years away, and we have been following it since May when it first occurred. It was so bright and blue it outshined the entire galaxy it was in. Okay. And then over time, it dimmed and dimmed and dimmed and dimmed. And now it's just a faint red dot within the galaxy of stars that are out there in this galaxy. But we've been following it and capturing it all along. And viewers get to watch and follow along.
So, how many anomalies have you seen doing this stuff where you couldn't identify what it was?
We've had a number of anomalies. Every single time we stream, we see strange things come through the field every single time. And so it's interesting to for people who watch, who want to see interesting stuff happen. We do see a lot of satellites, like Starlink satellites, are, of course, very popular. Um, the observatory in the desert is green, so meaning we are off the grid. We are using solar panels for power. We have battery storage for our power at night, and the telescope itself is run by those batteries and powered by the sun. So everything out there is off the grid and green, so we're not affected by power outages and things. It's just the greatest thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I
Yeah.
knew this was going to go quick. It's always fascinating. I'm going to have to go listen to this again, because I know I missed half of it, Mark.
You're the host, man. You heard it all.
Oh no, man! I learned something every time I have you on. It's crazy.
Man,
Uh,
it's great being with you. You really you actually have a talent for this. This is really cool.
well, that's awful nice of you. Yeah, I want to thank I didn't even do a commercial break tonight because I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted to get the most time with you. Thank you for Revelton Spirits down in Osceola, Iowa. Go check out the distillery. Hank and Rob and Christy, we'd love to see you. Thanks to Soldier Boy Jerky out there by Mark. They're out on the East Coast. Thanks to them supporting all the troops, and Onyx Onyx is one of the best apps you can have on your phone to know where you're at, no matter where you're traveling. Onyx is going to show you exactly where you're at on
I'm
this
gonna try
earth.
that.
Yeah, they're good. Mark, one more time, if someone wants to follow what's going on, or hey, before I let you, what's the next event that you're going to be doing an event with?
Let's see. I'm gonna be at the Ozark UFO conference. I'm gonna be at Contact in the Desert again. Uh, and if anyone wants to see me, I'm at all for some reason. I'm on most episodes of History Channel's The Proof Is Out There. I'm their photo and video analyst. So
That's
I
awesome.
been doing that for years now, actually.
Yeah, no,
So that,
you do a great job. Hey, do me a favor. If there's something cooking, I'm going to get you. I'll get a hold of you next quarter, first quarter next year, because I know you're busy. But anything's cooking in between there, would you please let me know?
I will indeed. I will indeed. And if people want to come check us out at, on our skytourlive.org or at Skytour Livestream on YouTube, just look up my name, Marc Dantonio, and Skytour, and you'll see it on YouTube. It's a big
Eh,
channel up there.
yeah, and you can ask him questions, folks. Because when I popped in there, Mark actually said hi and everything. Hey, Outdoors Dan, and
Yeah.
it was neat. You did a great job with that.
Yeah, I mean, we had, let's see, last night, I forget how many people were watching, but I said hi to every single person, and I took
Yeah,
lots and lots of questions from the chats. And so it's all very interesting stuff,
yeah,
you know.
I
And if
appreciate it.
you're a mind to support us, you can join our Patreon too. It's all at skytourlive.org.
Well, there you go. All right, let me say goodbye to the network audience real quick. This is going to wrap it up for this edition to Unknown Files. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back, God willing, next week. Until then, we'll see you in the shadows. All right, I am off the network. We are
All
back on
right.
scheduled programming. I'm going to say goodnight to all my Facebook audience. And thank you for that. Mark, great evening,
Sure.
man. Thank you.
All right, man. Thank you for having me on, Dan. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Hey, I'm serious. I always have a good time when you're on. I always learn a bunch of stuff. But let me
Awesome.
know let me know if something's going on. I'd love to get you back on when we can. Okay.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Have a great evening, Mark, and thanks so much for the time tonight.
Okay, Dan. We'll see you later.
All right. Night, everybody. Have a great evening.